Welcome back. So a few days ago, I woke up to 1,000 subscribers, which is wild and really awesome. Thank you so much for subscribing and supporting. But I wanted to do something to celebrate that milestone, and the best thing I thought of was making my own play button. I recently started going to a makerspace that has these really cool laser cutters, and I figured this would be a good first project to get used to their workflow. So I did some research on the dimensions of the actual silver play button, and it turns out it is 12 inches by 10 inches with a thickness of 1/2 inch. I wanted mine to be a bit smaller, like scaled down of that, so I decided 1/4 inch for the thickness. And for the material, I was thinking about what you would have before silver, and I came up with either wood or acrylic. Now I feel like acrylic is too fancy for 1,000, so I ended up going with this 1/4 inch plywood that I have left over from an old project. And the design went pretty quickly. It was just putting together a few different pieces like text and a logo. I ended up going with a width of 8 inches, and proportionally that gave a height of 9.6 inches. And for the actual content, I just started with an SVG of the YouTube logo, and then underneath that I added in the text. I didn't really look into what the actual font is for the play buttons, but I like Bebas New, so I went with that. I also realized that there's a whole YouTube logo at the bottom of the play button. For mine, I ended up replacing it with my own logo, so it's a bit more personalized. And for this project, I ended up using Affinity Designer rather than Adobe Illustrator, and I really liked it. I might try and make the full switch to that away from the Creative Cloud suite, but it was time to make it. I'm using this 100-watt Boss laser at a local makerspace, and it's been really good for like the small tests I've done. The bed is just about 3 feet by 4 feet, so you can fit some fairly large stuff like this sheet of plywood. And to control it, it uses a software called Lightburn, which is pretty standard for laser cutters. It pretty much takes your vector or your image and maps it to a cut or an engrave based off the speed and the power you want, and then it takes that information and sends it to the machine. I might get into that whole process of setting up your file in a future video of the different project. Comment down below if you're interested in seeing that. But now that the file is ready to go, I can load the material, focus the laser head, which is important, and start cutting. I ended up doing 3 different versions of this. I just tweaked the settings for each one to see what would give me the best results for the engraves. And each one took about 10 minutes, of which most of the time was spent on the actual play button, since the text engraved fairly quickly. Once they were cut, I sanded it down a little bit to get rid of any burn marks, and then it was ready to finish. So 2 of them got some wood stain, I think the color is English chestnut, and then all 3 of them got 2 coats of semi-gloss polyurethane. I was really interested in seeing how the engraving looked on the stained wood and if it would pop more or if it was harder to read. But before I show you the final results, I also wanted to make a stand so I can put one of these up on my shelf. And to do that, I made a model of the plaque in Fusion that I then angled at 5 degrees since I didn't want it to just stand straight up. And I ended up with a pretty minimal design. It's just kind of like 2 little feet for the plaque. This was mostly for the sake of saving time on the print, which ended up taking just under an hour. I think it was about 45 minutes at a 0.2mm layer height and a 20% infill. And I just printed these out in black PLA. Now that those are done, we can just slide the plaque in and we're good to go. Like I mentioned earlier, there are 3 different versions of this. The first one, I ended up putting the wood stain on. It had the power set a bit too high. For the second one, I brought that down and the engraving was a bit light, but I also rotated the wood 90 degrees so you can actually see the grain in the engraving. And the third one, I flipped the wood back, but the power was still a bit low and it's kind of light. And I think all of these look great. Although I think my favorite one is the second one, since the wood grain in the engraving just looks kind of interesting, it looks unique. But let me know down in the comments which one you liked the most. But thanks for watching and supporting the channel. Be sure to subscribe down below for more videos about tech, cameras, and making. Here's a video about clear headphones, and here's a video that YouTube thinks you're gonna like the best.